Un Estados Unidos postapocalíptico, un viaje lleno de peligros y un futuro donde la tecnología lo controla todo. Basada en la novela ilustrada por Simon Stålenhag, The Electric State, o El Estado Eléctrico, es la nueva apuesta de los hermanos Russo, directores de Avengers Endgame, esta vez con Millie Bobby Brown y Chris Pratt como los protagonistas. Entre robots gigantes, ciudades en ruinas y secretos ocultos, esta película nos invita a reflexionar sobre el impacto que tiene la tecnología en nuestras vidas. Y tuve la oportunidad de platicar con los hermanos Russo y Chris Pratt sobre su visión del cine, el mensaje y los detalles que para ellos hacen de esta película algo especial. Cinéfilos, si hay algo que me queda bastante claro, es el hecho de que las películas que nos marcaron en nuestra infancia siguen influyendo en el cine de hoy. Pero en una era de plataformas y entretenimiento sin fin, ¿cómo se siguen contando historias con impacto? Joe y Anthony Russo, visionarios directores detrás de cintas como Capitán América, Soldado del Invierno, Avengers Infinity War o Endgame, han redefinido el cine de gran escala. Y también en la era del streaming han incursionado con proyectos como The Gray Man y ahora esta película. Y en esta conversación que van a escuchar, ellos reflexionan sobre los clásicos que los inspiraron, su visión del cine actual y cómo siguen buscando crear historias que puedan conectar con el público a nivel global.
And you know, like watching this movie, I think it's impossible not to think of the classic films from the 80s and the 90s. Movies, you know, that shaped generations and defined a way of storytelling. So if you had to choose one film from your childhood to show a new generation of filmmakers and say like, this is cinema, which one would it be and what would you tell them about this movie?
It's such a hard question to answer because there's so many.
Yeah.
I'm trying not to go to the normal, the normal ones, but
Star Wars.
I know. Am I going to say that or
E.T.
Back to the Future?
Back to the Future.
You know, it's such. This movie, I'll pick E.T. just because I don't know. There's just this nice connection to the sort of the strength and the innocence that could be found in youth and children, and the power that has to sort of connect people to one another. Also a sense of wonder in terms of what's possible, the infinite possibilities, and the ability to just sort of fall into a fantasy world and really feel it as if it's real. I think those qualities are things we tried to channel in the Electric State.
The movie has a reading about escaping reality through technology and how it can become addictive or even destructive. But ironically, for some people, cinema and streaming platforms can also be seen as forms of escapism. They can criticize, you know, like we waste time watching content or movies instead of living in the real world. So as filmmakers, how do you perceive this duality? How do you use this tool in a way that is just not for entertainment, but also to bring some value to the audience?
Well, it's a great question, right? There's a sense of irony to all of it. However, I think what the movie is trying to say is that it's not demonizing technology. It's saying you need to have a balanced, healthy relationship to technology. It can't be all-consuming. It can't be a crutch for you. It can't be something that you overuse. It can't be something you're addicted to. And we agree. We think that there's an overconsumption of content today, unhealthy overconsumption of it. In a lot of ways, it's people using it to forget how complicated the world is. So you can forgive them for doing it, but it's not necessarily healthy. You know, we're storytellers, and we like to tell stories, and we like to infuse those stories with what we feel are relevant thematics, so that people can connect to the story and maybe be entertained and be happy, be sad, laugh, cry, and then walk away from the movie with something to think about. And this movie in particular is, hey, just take a moment to think about how many stories you watch, how much you watch them, and how much you consume them. And maybe, turn to the person next to you and look them in the eye and have a moment of connection instead of looking at a screen.
I think that paradox that you identify is so interesting to us because is it escapism, is content, or does it have some kind of nutritional value or usefulness? I think that's a paradox that we actually try to reconcile in our storytelling itself. You know, we like movies that are entertaining. We like movies that invite you in. We like movies that are a good time. But we also like to challenge ourselves. We like to challenge audiences. And we like to put some big ideas in there that are hard to process, hard for all of us to process in our real world. So I think we really try to hit both of those aspects of entertainment and content in a single expression.
¿Quién decide quién tiene derecho a existir? Esta película también nos plantea preguntas profundas sobre el control, burocracia y el impacto de la tecnología en la sociedad. Chris Pratt, bastante conocido por algunos icónicos roles en películas de ciencia ficción como Guardianes de la Galaxia o Jurassic World, vuelve a colaborar con los hermanos Russo después de Avengers Infinity War y Endgame. En esta historia interpreta a Kids, un personaje atrapado en un mundo en donde la tecnología dicta las reglas. Así que platiqué con él sobre el mensaje de la película, su personaje y la relación entre su personaje y el de Millie Bobby Brown, y cómo lograron trabajar la química para la pantalla.
Was there anything in his journey that made you reflect on how technology has changed the way we live and who we are? Like, did it make you question anything on a personal level?
Well, the film definitely deals with some important themes, and for me personally, you know, I really resonated with the idea that soldiers, you know, I don't want to give anything too much away, but Keats has a robot sidekick, Herman, and they met as enemies and realized that they had more in common than they were told or that they thought, and that was a threat of humanity. Even though Herman's not a human, he's a sentient being, which is what, you know, humanity, it feels like is, you know, he feels very human. He's got thoughts and emotions, and he saved my life. And so the idea that, like, you know, soldiers who are told they're enemies might have more in common than they realize.
You know, something that stuck in my head in the movie, it's a phrase that Mr. Peanut says. He says something like, your right to exist can depend on a piece of paper. I think that this phrase carries a weight that can be also interpreted on different levels, including in a political or social context. So do you think that there was like a conscious intention to comment on, you know, bureaucracy or access to rights in our reality?
Oh man, such a great question. The wonderful thing about sci-fi when it's done right is it will trigger people to ask questions. And I think that wasn't a question that came up for me, but I could see how it's a question that comes up for someone. That's what I love about sci-fi, is we see ourselves in the characters, we see our own circumstances in the situations, and when sci-fi is done right, we ask all the right questions. For me, the questions I were asking more were like, is my reliance on technology clouding my relationships with humanity? And that was something that I found was really relevant for me. But man, I'm just starting the process of promoting this film, and that's the first that someone has brought that up, and it's a really great question, and it's a really beautiful question. I don't know if that was intentional or not. I'll have to ask Joe and Anthony, but I hadn't thought of it that way, and it's really thought-provoking.
I think the relationship between your character and Michelle is key to the story. So how was it to build that dynamic with Millie Bobby Brown? Was there like a moment on set where you felt the chemistry between the characters really coming to life?
I think the moment that it really came to life was in a diner when my character has just had a haircut and he's growing up a little bit, and he basically admits to her that he'd been running his whole life and that he didn't think there was anything worth living for, but having met her, he realizes there's something to fight for. I think that moment, to me, is when their relationship really gels. I felt that with Millie long before. I was always looking forward to doing that scene because I knew that it was a pivotal scene for the characters, and I met her and I got along with her really well right away, and so yeah, maybe that scene stands out.
Cinéfilos y cinéfilas, espero que hayan disfrutado de esta entrevista. Déjenme saber qué opinaron de los comentarios de los directores, de Chris Pratt o de la película. Si es que yo tengo la oportunidad de verla, déjenlo aquí abajo en los comentarios. Muchas gracias por ver este video. Recuerden que pueden seguirnos en nuestras redes sociales de Fuera de Foco en Instagram, en donde estamos platicándoles y actualizándoles de todo sobre el mundo del cine y de la televisión. Pueden encontrarnos como @Fuera de Foco Latama, y a mí pueden encontrarme como @GabyMesa8. Muchas gracias por ver este video. Mi nombre es Gaby Mesa con Z. Adiós.